Hi, I'm Kim Powell.
And I'm Robyn Thomas.
I'm going to do our presentation on human reproduction.
Growth and development. Okay, so in both male and females, puberty is initiated in the hypothalamus. Gonadotropin releasing hormone signals induced pulsed secretions of luteinizing hormone. Secretion of luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone cause a release of estriadol in the females and testosterone in males. This leads to the development of secondary sex characteristics. So in males, the first sign of puberty is around 12 to 14 years, and there's an enlargement in the testes, and because they prepare to carry out spermatogenesis. An enlargement of the penis to reach its adult size occurs. This occurs about 2 years after the onset of puberty. The scrotum in males gets darker and redder in colour, and an increase in testosterone causes facial hair and body hair to grow. Also, structures of the larynx increase in size, which causes the voice to deepen.
Okay, changes during puberty of a female. Girls usually begin puberty between the ages of 10 and 12. The first changes is in the enlargement of the ovaries and the breast growth. The first menstrual bleed is known as menarche, usually occurs 2 years after the first onset of puberty. Other changes of puberty are rapid growth, a change in the distribution of body fat, and the widening of the pelvis.
Okay, so gametogenesis is the process by which male and female gonads are produced. They're both formed in the male and female in the gonads. When sexual reproduction takes place, the male and female must produce gametes, which are the sex cells, and this is done through the process of meiosis. This is sometimes called reduction division because the diploid parental cell divides and it produces 4 haploid cells. Spermatogenesis is the process of the formation of sperm. It occurs in the seminiferous tubules, and it includes the formation of spermatids and the formation of spermatozoa. The spermatogenesis is triggered by hormones. These hormones include gonadotropin releasing hormone, luteinizing hormone, and follicle stimulating hormone. Testosterone is also a hormone that's required to complete the mitotic division. Okay, so it takes place as a sequence, and the first stage of spermatogenesis is the cells from the germinal epithelium on the outside of the seminiferous tubules, dividing through a process called mitosis. This produces the mother cells known as the spermatogonia. As you can see on the diagram on the board, that's the first stage of spermatogenesis. Okay, so each of the mother cells are known as a spermatogonia, and each are identical, and these cells are produced through the first mitotic division, and then the secondary spermatocytes are produced. Each secondary spermatocyte then completes the second mitotic division to form spermatids. The spermatids then feed off the Sertoli cells, as you can see here, and they provide nutrients and help them to mature and grow tails of sperm. Once they feed on that as a source of nutrition, they then turn into the sperm cells and enter the epididymis for storage.
Oogenesis is the production of the female gametes, or ova, which occurs in the outer layers of the ovaries of the fetus before birth. As with spermatogenesis, oogenesis starts with the diploid germ cells, oogonia, which go through the process of mitosis to produce a primary oocyte, as you can see here. The primary oocyte starts to the first meiotic division, but arrests until further on in life when it's required. During adolescence, the anterior pituitary gland produces hormones causing follicles within the ovary to start to develop, resulting in the completion of the first meiotic division by the primary oocyte. This creates a haploid secondary oocyte containing half of the chromosomes with most of the cytoplasm. A secondary smaller cell known as the polar body, which has half of the chromosomes and a less cytoplasm. This is not fully functional and usually degenerates and dies. A secondary meiotic arrest occurs until ovulation, when the secondary oocyte is released by the ovary and travels through the fallopian tube towards the uterus. If this is fertilised by sperm, the secondary oocyte will complete the secondary meiotic division and a mature ovum containing 46 chromosomes, and another polar body will be produced. Okay, we're now going to talk through the differences between spermatogenesis and oogenesis. Within spermatogenesis, the production starts during puberty. With oogenesis, it starts during the fetal development.
Okay, so within spermatogenesis, 4 spermatozoa are produced from a primary spermicide. However, from the oogenesis, 1 ovum and 3 polar bodies are produced from a primary oocyte, so they're a bit different with what they produce.
Millions of sperm are produced daily within spermatogenesis, but only 1 ovum is produced roughly around every 28 days.
Okay, so another difference between the two gametogenesis is that spermatogenesis is continuous throughout adult life. However, oogenesis ends when women go through menopause.
Okay, with both spermatogenesis and oogenesis, they both occur within the reproductive organs. When the spermatogenesis, it's in the testes, and with oogenesis in the ovaries.
So another similarity between the two gametogenesis is that they both go through the process of meiosis, which obviously creates the different cells within the different gametogenesis.
And again, with the two, spermatogenesis and oogenesis, they both produce a haploid cell from a diploid cell.
So as you can see, there's a few differences and a few similarities between the two gametogenesis. Okay, so we're now going to talk through and explain the effects of hormones on the ovaries and the endometrium. I'm firstly going to talk through the effects of hormones on the ovaries. So the ovaries carry out the ovarian cycle, which is controlled by chemical messengers known as hormones. Gonadotropin-releasing hormone is released by the hypothalamus, which stimulates follicle-stimulating hormone known as FSH, and luteinizing hormone, which I'm going to refer to as LH. So both of these are released due to the gonadotropin-releasing hormone that stimulates them both to be released. They're both secreted by the pituitary gland in the brain, and follicle-stimulating hormone is responsible for initiating follicular growth and the secretion of estrogen by the growth follicles. Luteinizing hormone stimulates ovarian follicles and granulosa cells to develop, which leads them to secreting estrogen, and this then leads to ovulation. So luteinizing hormone also helps the corpus luteum to fully develop, and this stimulates estrogen, progesterone, inhibin and relaxin production. So progesterone is secreted by the corpus luteum, which works with estrogen to then prepare the endometrium for implantation. Estrogen helps to maintain the ovarian structure and help it to fully develop. The largest follicle, called the Graafian follicle, secretes so much estrogen that it actually inhibits mature follicles from maturing.
Okay, the effects of hormones on the endometrium. The endometrium is shed during menstruation. The follicle-stimulating hormone causes the ovum to mature and the follicle to release estrogen. Increasing estrogen inhibits follicle-stimulating hormone but stimulates the luteinizing hormone. This causes the right follicle to burst and release the ovum. The newly formed corpus luteum then releases the progesterone, which further stimulates endometrial thickening with some estrogen. Both hormones suppress the LH and the FSH. If the fertilisation does not occur, the corpus luteum will then break down, progesterone and estrogen levels will drop, and the cycle will then begin again.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk through and explain how fertilisation occurs. So fertilisation normally occurs in the first third of the uterine tube, or otherwise known as the fallopian tube. The sperms involved contain a large enzyme-filled vesicle above their nucleus known as an acrosome. This is central to completing fertilisation. Most sperm encounter a secondary oocyte in the oviduct or the fallopian tube. Since the release of the sperm's acrosomes have matured during a process called capacitation, or otherwise known as developing the capacity to fertilise. The interaction of the sperm with the molecules of the zona pellucida trigger an acrosomal reaction. During this process and reaction, enzymes are released from the acrosome of the sperms, and this is done by a process called exocytosis. The enzymes released from the reaction digest the material between the inner follicle cells and the glycoprotein jelly of the zona pellucida. This allows one sperm to pass through to reach the oocyte membrane. Okay, so the membrane of both the sperm and the oocyte fuse, and the head of the sperm is consumed, and the chromosomes are released into the cytoplasm of the oocyte. So this then leads to three events which are on the board. So the first one is the cortical reaction. This is where the cortical granules released by the oocytes, they're released by a process called exocytosis. Okay, so this causes a reaction from the glycoprotein of the zona pellucida, which forms a fertilisation membrane to prevent any further entry of the sperm. Okay, this then leads to the second event, which is meiosis taking place by the oocyte to produce the ovum and one polar body. The chromosomes are then from the sperm then join those of the ovum, and a diploid zygote is formed, and that is the end of fertilisation. So just got a little picture on the board of where the sperms are meeting the ovum. Over.
Okay, following on from fertilisation is implantation. Fertilisation occurs here in the first third of the fallopian tubes. Following fertilisation, the zygote divides through mitosis until a blastocyst is formed, which is a hollow ball of cells. This divides through mitosis as it travels here until it reaches the uterus. Implantation occurs when the zygote becomes implanted within the endometrium or the lining of the uterus. This can take up to 3 or 4 days from it actually reaching the uterus. The trophoblast, known as the outer layer of the blastocyst, develops into the embryonic membranes, known as the chorion and the amnion. The chorion develops villi, which will grow into the surroundings of the uterus tissues where they absorb the nutrients. This then forms the part of the placenta. Okay, we're now going to go on to the role of the placenta for the developing embryo. The placenta is an organ which is attached to the uterus wall. The chorion, known as the primitive placenta, develops chorionic villi, which connects to the fetus through the umbilical cord. The placenta's role is to form a selective barrier between the mother and the fetus, mother's blood and the fetal blood. It regulates nutrition for the fetus through a mixture of processes known as diffusion, active transport and pinocytosis. The placenta allows water, minerals, salts, glucose, amino acids, lipids, vitamins to pass from the mother to the fetus.
The placenta also allows gas exchange from the fetus to the mother. Oxygen diffuses from the mother to the fetus, and carbon dioxide diffuses from the fetus to the mother. The placenta also regulates excretion of waste products such as CO2 nitrogenous waste materials, and it does this by diffusing these products from the fetus to the mother. The placenta also protects the fetus by passing antibodies and passive immunity from the mother to the fetus. Passes antibodies from the mother to the fetus, and this helps to develop passive immunity. So after 3 months, the placenta also produces its own progesterone to maintain the endometrium, and that's the role of the placenta. Okay, so we're now going to talk through the key points of fetal development, and Kim's going to start with week 9.
Okay, week 9 is the transition period from the embryonic stage to the fetal period. The fetus is approximately 22 millimetres long. The face is slowly forming, as well as the tiny taste buds in the mouth and on the tongue. The ridges identify where the fingers and toes will be. The organs, nerves start to function, and the eyes are slightly larger, but the eyelids are still fused shut.
So on week 13, which is this picture here, the fetus is about 7 centimetres long and weighs around 25 grams. The fingerprints at this stage are formed, and the arms are starting to form. At this stage, the fetus can be seen sucking its thumb, and all the essential organs are formed. And female fetuses have approximately 2 million eggs developing in their ovaries.
Okay, during week 17, which you can see here, it will be approximately 11 centimetres long and weighs around 140 grams. The skeleton is made up of cartilage, a rubbery cartilage. The protective substance called myelin slowly begins to wrap itself around the spinal cord. At this stage, sweat glands are developing, and the umbilical cord becomes stronger.
Okay, so moving on to the next two that we're going to discuss, I'm going to talk about week 19, which is like this picture here. So at this stage, the fetus is approximately 14 centimetres long and weighing around 240 grams. So at this point, the cartilage begins to harden, and the vernix caseosa begins to coat the skin, which is this is a white, thin, waxy coating that helps to regulate the body temperature of the fetus. The heartbeat at this point is twice as fast as the mother's, and the brain of the fetus is continuing to develop and is, in specific, developing its senses.
Okay, around week 29, the fetus will be about 38 centimetres long and weighs roughly around 1 kilogram. Its hair is growing, got quite a good start of hair. The fetus, if it's a male, the testes will have descended from near the kidneys to the groin area. Within females, the clitoris is prominent because it's not yet covered by the labia. The head is enlarging to enable room for the brain, and the fetus at this point reacts to sound and light.
And that's our 5 key stages of fetal development.
Okay, we're now going to go through the 3 key stages of childbirth. The first stage is stage 1, which is the longest stage, and it's due to a hormonal response to the baby's adrenal gland. There are 3 signs that labour is starting. One is the contractions which occur in the muscles of the uterus wall. These contract gradually to open up the cervix, which you can see here. Another sign is that the waters break. This is the amniotic fluid that surrounds the baby. The third sign of labour is a show, which is a mucus plug that comes away during this stage. This plug usually sits within the cervix here. There are 3 sub-stages within stage 1. The first one is early labour, which starts when the cervix is barely dilated, around about 1 to 3 centimetres. These contractions help to open up the cervix and to push the baby into the birth canal. Oxytocin is a hormone which is produced by the pituitary gland that causes a stretch response which neurons detect and send positive feedback to the pituitary gland, which produces more oxytocin, which causes stronger contractions. This is called positive feedback. It's a positive feedback mechanism. The stronger the feedback, the stronger the hormones. The second stage of the active labour, second stage is active labour, sorry. This is when the cervix is dilated, anything from about 4 centimetres to 10 centimetres. These contractions are a lot more powerful. The third substage of this transitional stage is now moving from stage 1 into stage 2, which is when the contractions are so strong that pushing now starts to give birth.
Okay, so now going to talk through stage 2 of childbirth. This stage is known as crowning, and this is when the cervix is fully dilated at 10 centimetres. This stage occurs when the cervix reaches 10 centimetres dilated, and that means that the baby is now moving into the birth canal. At this stage, contractions will last anything from 60 to 90 seconds and will come every 3 to 5 minutes. At this stage often lasts hours, and you are the urge to push is a very common thing. Midwives at this stage may urge breathing, not pushing, in order to avoid tearing the perineum. At this stage, the head emerges first, and after a few contractions, the baby's head will be born. The baby's head and shoulders then rotate, and after a few minutes, the rest of the baby will be born. Okay, so moving on to stage 3. This is the longest stage. Moving on to stage 3. So this is the afterbirth, and this is where the placenta is born. This is where the baby begins to breathe for itself, and the umbilical cord is clamped and cut. This stage separates the baby and mother into 2 separate people. In this stage, the delivery of the placenta occurs, and this can take anything from 5 to 10 minutes, and an injection of oxytocin may be offered in order to stimulate the uterus to contract and cause the placenta to come away from the uterus wall. In this stage, it's common for a midwife to ask for pushing. This is to peel the placenta away from the uterus and cause the blood vessels inside of the uterus to seal up or close. This stops any bleeding that may be occurring at this stage. This is the last stage of childbirth.